Everybody has a story, and we aim to reveal the most impactful experiences of our guests that our listeners can learn and grow from. American Premium Vodka is a proud partner that helps make this show possible. Please enjoy this episode of the Blueprint Banter. This is the Blueprint Banter. I am Derek Lyons, your host, and with me is Todd Sommerfeld, the chairman of Kreg Tool. Thanks for coming, Todd.
Great to be here, Derek.
Can you just give us a little bit of what does your day-to-day look like with Kreg, your current role, and just sort of where Kreg's at in the market right now?
Yeah, you bet. So I'm a second generation owner of Kreg Tool. Company is about 36 years old. So today, as chairman, I've I say I'm a retired CEO. So the shareholder role is one role, and running the business is another role. So today, a majority owner, I focus on business-wise strategy, and I'm heavily involved in product. It's a passion of mine, products, and these are consumer woodworking tools is what we make and what we sell. So it varies quite a bit from day to day. There's some days that I'm heavily involved in the business. There's days that I'm out doing completely different things in the community. But it hasn't always been the case. One of the reasons I stepped out of that is managing a business like that day to day was it's for some people. I'm not necessarily wired for that, I found. So
The management side of things specifically?
yeah, I mean, when I entered the business, it was in a management executive role was 15 people. So today we're about 180, have been 200 people. So running a business of that size is very different than kind of the entrepreneurial business, smaller business that I grew up in, that I learned how to manage. So I think it takes a certain type of individual, and I think a lot of smaller businesses, you have to learn how to progress from an entrepreneurial to a little more organized, structure, process driven type of business. And fortunately, I've been able to hire folks into that to do that.
Yeah, it is interesting the qualities in a human that it takes sort of to launch a business and get a business kind of rolling down the tracks. It is a much different skill set than the qualities in a human that it takes to sort of manage and guide that thing once it starts to grow, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's no. So the journey for me has been a lot of self-discovery over the years, because there's the business side of it, and then there's the leadership side of it, and where do you fit in that? So, in that, I don't think there's any one be-all, end-all style for leadership. Everybody's got their own. But, I think for me, it just, I was never in a business and learned how to manage it the size the business is today. And so to me, it boils down to that is just what are you made to do? And so individuals that do that, I think they really have to be intentional about growing from entrepreneurial leadership to little higher levels of larger organizations. It's a different style. Yeah. It's a different, what you're communicating, how you cascade things. I think has to be different because people come to the organization to work. If the entrepreneurial owner in the middle of it is doing everything, then people are going to leave because they came to do work and not bow to the king.
A lot of interesting nuggets there that I think we definitely need to get into. I mean, you mentioned self-discovery and sort of all of these things, and there is certainly that level of mirror check thing that all of us have to do. And it doesn't matter necessarily what level in business you are either, but you do have to be self-aware enough to understand, like, hey, am I doing the right things to get the things that we all need to get to? And just what does that look like? And I think it'll also, no matter what level, like whoever may be listening to this, I mean, I think the things we're going to talk about and through your experiences, it's applicable to so many different things. And self-discovery, and I've heard you talk about some things on other podcasts about potentially some like business life coach type people, if you want to get into any of that. And if I'm wrong on that, just let me know. But But all of those things are super important because if you think you're going down a path and then ultimately you're not operating in the way you need to go down that path, it can be destructive. So can you give us, before we dive into that, because I want to go back to when you were a teenager and sort of Kreg Tool got rolling, but can you give us a look at the depth or the complexities of Kreg Tool today and just give us a little bit more insight to how complicated it really is of a business? I mean, you guys are selling things internationally and so on and so forth. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, like I said, around 200 people. We sell in 70 different countries. 90% of what we sell is still in the U.S., but we sell to Lowe's, Home Depot, Amazon. Those three channels make up nearly 2/3 of our sales volume here in the U.S. We also believe in direct to consumer from not a sales channel but marketing channel. So that's a big push for us in what we do. So in addition to those sales channels, we historically have been a manufacturer that has made varying amounts of our own product. Today, very much a hybrid. We source all over the world, mostly components that we'll bring in and kit in what we're doing. But we still run manufacturing operations out of our Huxley facility, and those are injection molding and CNC machinery products. So we're a hybrid kind of manufacturer as well as sales, marketing, content creator, consumer brand building organization, which is always what we've been. It's just as the business has grown from 15 people to the size it is today, it just takes just different levels. So I talked about product, and I've loved product, been involved with product. When I was growing up in the business and we were creating new products, we didn't have a product team, a dedicated product team. We didn't have product engineers, product managers that we have now. We had a manufacturing manager, general manager, whatever, marketing team, and we would come together as a cross-functional team and we'd build product. Yeah. So we'd wear a different hat. Today, that's dedicated teams that do that. And so that's just the complexity of what was somebody else wearing a hat. Now, you don't wear as many hats. That's somebody's role full time. And so it's just the challenge and complexity for me when I was wearing all those hats, how I had to communicate the expectations. I didn't have to define them as well. I just did them. And so I interacted with so many different people cross-functionally when it was smaller. Now that's more iterative. It's done through silos become an issue. I don't think we're heavily siloed, but because people have their functional area, it can create silos that you have to create. The complexity is creating that cross-functionality across more specialized functions.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, when you go directly from physically with your hands, probably packaging product and putting things together, to jumping in a vehicle and going to a trade show and to selling the product, and you're technically then the marketing person. Back in those early days, I mean, you were quite literally involved with all of that, and it's not like you had to tell the other Todd how you felt about things. I mean, you were that person. So I think it's important to talk about a little bit and to get your perspective on, albeit it might be sort of obvious and to the listeners and people viewing this. I just think it's extremely critical to sort of dive into the human elements of that and to make sure that you are aware as those things are evolving, that things are changing. And even for myself in our small business, I've noticed that. I mean, as we hired a marketing director and somebody who's constantly posting on social, well, now it's not just my brain anymore spitting these things in the way that I would normally articulate it and sort of the sentiment that I've always wanted Showtime to have. It's now coming from a different person. And have I sort of communicated that well enough with them to get them to convey the same message that I feel like we need to? And
yeah, and I think that's been the challenge for me in the business is as it's grown, more of what I've been asked to do is, well, where are we going? What's it look like? And one, I'm kind of a visionary leader. I I spend more time thinking about where things could be, how they're going to operate strategically than an operator and how it gets done. I think when the business was small, I was, org chart right in the center, and then I had people around me. Even though you would draw it top down. So where I recognize the challenge in what you're talking about is, well, maybe I don't really know. Do I even know what I want? So when I'm in the center and people are coming to me, I kind of feel like I'm winging it as I go. And then when people start to say, well, where do you actually see it 3-4 years down the road? And I'm like, well, I'm not sure I want to even tell you that, because I'm not sure I know. And then I started doubting my capabilities, which was an interesting dynamic.
Well, let's bookmark that because I want to lead up to that point. I think that point, and people talk about imposter syndrome, there's so many levels to the growth of the human behind the business person, and why I thought today's episode was going to be so important. For those listening, the reason why I was super intrigued by getting Todd in here was I had the opportunity to tour the facility with a networking group that I'm in. And when you gave us that sort of initial, here's what's going on, there was a level of humility in what you were talking about. I thought that was different than other leaders to the scale that you are and what Kreg is. And I was extremely interested at that point. Like, I do want to pick this guy's brain more, because I could tell that it wasn't just a shield of body armor, we're awesome, I'm invincible type of feel. And there's just so many things I think to unpack from that and learn from that. And that's why I'd love to go down this story. So take us back to, how did Kreg start? Like, where were you in your life as a kid when your dad started it? Why did it start? And just kind of give us that idea.
Yeah. So the Kreg Tool, what we do is we make consumer woodworking tools. And so the first tool that my dad made, was in the mid-'80s, and it was a little U-shaped, what we call a pocket hole jig today. And what it does is it drills a hole at an angle in a piece of wood so you can drive a screw in one piece into a second piece. There were industrial machines that did this, but there wasn't a consumer kind of do-it-yourself product that did that. So he's a journeyman tool and die maker. He made one of these to build the kitchen cabinets in the house I grew up in. He built this house, spent 6 years building it. This project, kitchen cabinets, my mom didn't want to see the face frames nailed on. So the pocket hole hid the attachment of the face frame to the plywood cabinet carcass members on the side or on the inside. So it hid this joint. So built those kitchen cabinets, did that. My uncle, high school shop teacher, built custom kitchen cabinets in the summer. My dad's older brother, my dad gave him a version of this tool. He used it in his shop production, cabinet making production, for about 3-4 years, called it Kreg's Jig, which is today it's the Kreg Jig and Kreg Tool Company. It's spelled Kreg differently than Craig, but that's where the name kind of came from. And my uncle, kind of the original visionary of the organization, my dad's kind of the integrator, kind of technical, make it happen guy, said, you got to take this to a trade show. There's these woodworking trade shows go around the country. There's about 30 of them, bigger markets. So there's one up in Minneapolis. They went up, this is September of 1989 now, which is when we say we really started the business. And that trade show, my dad built 20 of these products. They sold all those, took orders for 22 more, and they were going to start a business. Well, not quite so easy. It's kind of risky starting a business. So there's a lot of excitement about maybe doing that. But he had a full-time job. My uncle had that job, and my mom was, I don't know. I was 13, 14 at the time. You got bills to pay, right? So did 3 or 4 more trade shows that year. So fall of '89, and then spring of 1990. So I turned 14 in 1990. And that year, my dad, where he was working, they moved that operation to Taiwan. It was a global operation up in Ames, Iowa, where they were doing that. And so we looked at different things, didn't jump right into the business. We looked at moving to Tennessee. He ended up getting a job offer from a guy, but he told him about these trade shows he was doing, and kind of was having success at them. And the guy told my dad, he said, Kreg, goes, this job will be here when you get back if it doesn't work out, but you got to go give that a try. And so, having that security in a back pocket, he's like, all right, I'll go out, we'll try it. So we kind of launched the business, decided to do that. That was, the spring of 1990. He had to finish out through the end of the summer where he was working to get his severance. So I actually, as a 14-year-old, which is amazing to me because I have a my youngest is 14 now, built in the back shop. He had a shop for another side business he was looking at, completely unrelated to tools, but I built products. So we built inventory. I'd call him up on the dial-up phone back in those days and pull him away and ask him some questions. But I was out there doing that.
Was this literally in your backyard?
Literally in the backyard. Yeah, it was a little 20 by 40 foot shop that just built inventory, and we'd store it in the warehouse, which was our garage. Ended up making our basement where my sister and I lived the office, and we launched the business. Spent 2 years ultimately doing that down there.
What did that look like for you specifically then? So this is like later or into the summer. This is the summer of 1990. You're 14, right? So I mean, are you like playing baseball and doing this, or I mean,
Yeah.
what is day to day life? I mean, because to your point, like thinking about your son being 14 now, and even thinking about myself as a 14-year-old, and it's interesting, to have that sort of discipline and still be a kid.
What I liked about it is it was a job that paid me, and so I was looking. I save enough to buy a car. Back in those days, you'd have CDs. You build. Everybody'd have speakers they put. So it was a job, paid me money, and that's really all I cared about, to be honest with you, early on. But later that year, I was able to go to a trade show with him down in St. Louis. So this was one of the shows that he had gone to the year before, and so it was a repeat visit. And so we loaded up product in the Ford Aerostar minivan and drove down to St. Louis on a Thursday. Got there Friday morning, set up, and my dad, journeyman tool and die maker. It was really interesting to see him with a microphone. Doing we had about a 15-minute sales pitch that my uncle kind of created, and then he'd say, okay, if you want to buy one, go see Todd. And so I'm back there, and really that was my first interaction with the customer. And these customers, I still see, the guy must have bought one the year before, and he brought his friend over, and he was saying, you got to buy one. It's the greatest thing. And that whole interaction I can still see in my mind, because I'm like, this crap that I'm making in my backyard, people actually enjoy. It's actually creating an impact that I can tangibly see. And so that was really foundational for me in kind of the vision of what a business, this business, but a business can do and how it impacts people beyond, the employee who just cares about making money, which is what I was.
Yeah, that's extremely important. When you're able to sort of adhere emotions, I should say, to a product or business or service or whatever, it's certainly different than it is just to see on paper how much money am I making, how am I going to spend my money. And you often hear people talk about, getting into business for the right reasons and all these cliches and whatever, but the real deal is if you're not sort of impacting people in a positive way, it's hard to at least sustain it. And so for early on for you to see that, I mean, that had to be impactful. If you still remember like that moment, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's because I experienced it. And one of the things with that business, I had the opportunity to not only that, but when I came back into the business after college and 7 months of public accounting, I did a lot of trade shows. And so early on, when the company was 15 and I was involved with it, the vision I knew and I saw, I could feel more than I could articulate. And the folks that would come with me and do trade shows, you get it, and so that's that connection to the customer, and what we're actually doing is purposeful. And I'm come to say, well, you need to, every business has a purpose and there's a purpose, but I couldn't articulate it early on, but I could feel it. And it's that connection to purpose which connected to the customer and that I resonated with.
Yeah, it's interesting because that articulation piece is so important, especially as a company grows, and to be able to communicate that to others around you. Um, that feeling, because everybody that's involved with the business essentially has to have that same, not, they're never going to feel about it the same way that you probably did, but they do need to at least be aware of it, right? And like the importance of that.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's important that they do, and I think the one of the roles as a leader is to connect your people to that. And I haven't quite thought about it this way, but early on, the way I would do that is I'd take people with me to trade shows, and we would experience that together. So I didn't have to articulate it. I had a mechanism to experience it with folks. It's later on as the organization grows and not everybody can go to a trade show, that now take that experience that you can feel and put it into words so you can communicate it to your people.
That is interesting, though, that like early on you were like, it just was sort of common sense to you. That's in a way, well, instead of me telling you, just come with me, and then you'll know, But you were in a sense, that was a form of leadership at the time, because you were enabling them to see it for themselves. But you probably didn't think about it in that way. It was just like, hey, if you want to feel how I feel, come see it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's jump through. I mean, so things, obviously it's sort of successful immediately, and not like, I don't mean in terms of you guys are just crushing it, making all the money in the world or whatever, but it's being received well to the people that you're presenting it to. And so as you progress then through high school, I mean, do you start get a feeling, excuse me, do you start getting a feeling early on that's like, hey, this thing's going to be real and I could potentially have a place in this? Or did it take a while to kind of get there? If you could just sort of explain like how that felt.
Yeah, and so the rest of high school, I worked in the business, and I had that experience with the trade show. But I played 4 sports back in those days, and chasing girls, and my long-term career wasn't top of mind. So, I ended up I knew I wanted to go to business school. I ended up going into accounting, which it is what it is. It was good. So, but I spent 7 months in public accounting, and then my dad asked me if I wanted to join the business. We hadn't talked about it ever before. It's the other interesting aspect of Kreg Tool is a family business. So it started kind of with my dad and his uncle. By the time I joined the business in '99, my dad and my uncle used to do a lot of trade shows. He ended up doing trade shows for about 10 years. My dad kind of stayed back and built the business, built the product, and dealt with the reality of those things.
If I just interrupt 1 second, was it sort of talked about or understood that they kind of had that rocket fuel thing going on at the time with the visionary and integrator?
No.
Like, okay.
No.
So it was happening in for good reasons, but it wasn't like discussed.
It was correct.
Okay.
Correct. And I've only recently kind of like it made sense to me that my uncle was the visionary. Because my dad and my uncle ended up, had a falling out. They didn't agree. My uncle never was an equity stake in the business, and there's a lot of hard feelings. And so they kind of split prior to me joining. And one of the reasons that it was not, my mom was really, really concerned about me working in the business because, my dad and my uncle, they didn't talk from that point to the rest of their lives. They didn't speak, right? So there was that dynamic, and her for good reason, but we ended up getting through that, and so I joined. 7 months out. They spent 7 months outside of the business, and then I joined.
What time frame is that then?
So now we're in April of 1999.
Okay, so it's chronologically they had their falling out, and then you were working elsewhere, and at that time was like, hey, but I still need other help, and let's bring Todd in, or just, I mean, what did that conversation look like?
It was 1990, about a year earlier, where they they had a falling out. The driver for me coming into the business, so this was a patented product. We were doing these trade shows. There was really no competition for the first 10 years of the business. I mean, some, but largely, we market leaders by far. And in April of, well, early in '99, a competitive product that came out and received a like in a magazine article, it was the top tool. So ours was second, and this one was number one because it had new features that ours didn't have, some adjustability, and it actually infringed the patent, but we didn't have sophisticated enough patent lawyers at the time to help us understand how. So we ended up not kicking it off the market, but that was the driver that my dad's like, okay, I have to innovate. I have to continue to grow. Can't just do the same thing forever and ever. And, he was like, I'm burned out. I've done this for 10 years. I'm already ready to go do something else. Todd, would you come into the business? I'll give you 5 years, kind of mentor you, get you going. And so I said, okay, sure. Well, I'll come in and do it. I said, biggest thing is I was just married at the time. Yeah. I did want to have kids. And so I'm like, it's not okay that we just stay here. I said, if I'm going to want to grow the business, whatever that looks like. All right.
So you're in your mid-20s.
Yeah, I'm 23.
Wow. When that conversation's taking place, and yeah, that is important because so you were married at that time or getting married, and did you guys have any kids yet?
No.
Okay.
Not yet.
So what's your wife, like, how does she at this time, I mean, just for you, because a lot of people listening that have ever gone through anything like this can understand that there's a whole dynamic and conversation. Like there's the business level conversations, but then when you get into the personal side of things, you don't always have all the support in the world at home, or maybe you do have a ton of support, and that can really shift things. So just what did that dynamic look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think she was fairly supportive. We were not even a year married, and I remember prior to even being asked by my dad, I was not happy in my job. I didn't like the businesses I was auditing. I wasn't auditing business. I was auditing cities and banks and airports and things that I really wanted to learn more about businesses like I grew up in. So I complained to her one night. I was going to go into my manager and I said, I don't like what I'm doing. There's other things that I want to audit, and but I was afraid, quite honestly, that I'd tell my manager this and they would fire me. So I talked to her about that. She's like, well, do what you got to do. So I went in and I said I'd done all these jobs. I want to do these jobs. The manager said, okay, here, you get all the jobs you asked for. And then I quit like 2 months later. But she was supportive, and I think she knew there was a part of me that was connected to this business, and we were high school sweethearts. So she kind of grew up with me in this business ish, to the degree that it was one. So
at least was aware sort of that going on, and kind of understood that how it started and whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest thing that I think we dealt with is it was at that time, it wasn't a big business, and it was a tad risky in that, if I'm going to spend 5 years in this, is it going to be something that's going to, is this the right place to be? So
did you have direct conversations? And I think I'm personally very curious, just because having gone through sort of similar things in my past, that those conversations are interesting, and you really have to have like is it even fruitful enough to support having another person come in, and do I need to do it part-time and just because when a company's growing or trying to sustain or whatever, you cannot just come in and take money out of it. To grow a business, you have to reinvest and all of those things. So what did that conversation look like when you were coming on board with your dad, of like, hey, this is just what I need to get by. Can I at least get that? And I mean, what did the compensation conversation look like, and sort of all of that, if you want to share just kind of what that felt like?
Yeah, I mean, compensation wise, I made a little bit more than I was making auditing, which is great. But I don't know so much. I know what you're saying. The conversations there were less about bringing me on because they didn't bring me on with high comp. They were hiring a guy straight out of college, so I came at the right price. But certainly over the years, as then I started growing the business and hiring people, uh, those things were a challenge. And typically, what I do is rather than hire somebody, I just work. I do my day job, and then I needed networking. So I would be the IT guy at night,
Yeah.
and so for me, you'd wear a lot of hats, you'd work a lot of hours, and you'd leave at 6 in the morning and get home at 7 at night and eat at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. And so eventually the conversation was more with my wife. It's like, okay, like, you gonna hire somebody because or whatever you got to do to spend more time
Well,
at
I don't
home.
want to plant a seed that doesn't exist by any means, but in other situations, it could be perceived that, like, oh, the son of the guy that started the business or whatever, he's just going to come in and silver spoon, had the world given to him. And I'm not implying that any of this was happening at the time with people around you, your friends, your relatives, or whatever. I mean, if there was, you can certainly talk about it. But I mean, it to truly just come in and grind with the business as it's growing, obviously, is indicative of who you are as a person. But it doesn't always look that way.
So I think, yeah, I'm much. It's a much different situation now with my kids. If my kids were to come into the business than back in the day, I think some of that was there. I was aware of it, so I probably hit the grind that much harder because I felt like I had something to prove. I think the people in the business certainly understood, that dynamic. Some of the people in a small little community that we were in, there was a little bit of talk here and there about that, but it's one of those chips on your shoulder where you have something to prove. I think, looking back, one of the things that uh, I've always done is I've always just said, okay, I'm going to give my dad all the credit for everything, and I think to a fault now as the business is certain it's we kind of skip the Todd years that people experience, but I'm getting more comfortable talking about the role that I played in growing the business because it certainly wasn't. Is a very different business when I started than it is now.
You just opened up a whole nother can of worms of thought in my head with that whole deal. I mean, so you have to be selfless and you have to be humble. And so, and there's an
Easy for a 23-year-old to do.
Yeah. Well, but there's also this sort of outside pressure to be so a lot of times, but there's also, I mean, to the point of your time in not giving your time to your wife as much as she probably wanted, there is also a selfish side to a person that has to exist in order to get a company going in the direction that it needs to get going. And one of the things that I think that's extremely interesting in the different people that I've talked to and so on and so forth is like, how do I sort of stay confident and selfish almost a little bit with my time to deliver into this thing what it needs to go, but yet not take any credit for it, sort of dish all the credit and not be cocky or arrogant or the things that people, label you as if you're trying to just be confident in yourself. I mean, did you struggle with that at that time? Like, there had to be a level of it to some extent.
So you're talking about, yeah, just a dynamic of so to drive a business forward, it takes drive. It takes a little bit of confidence, um, you know, cockiness, arrogance, whatever it may be. I think who do you think you are that you're gonna you're gonna walk in and create something that doesn't exist? Um, and so for me, being young, it's just I had enough naivety, and I'm like, why not? And so but I was motivated by, if I don't do this, I'm not going to have income to grow a family. So I was very financially motivated. Uh, but I'm still serving the business, and so, I mean, so it's an interesting dynamic. You
Mhm.
serve yourself, but you serve others, and I think it's just the balance of that dynamic that has to be. Um, it can be a fine line, but you have to drive forward. So it takes a certain mindset to do that. I think, given that, we can get into that however you'd like, but it creates. Early on, it's one thing, but over time, it created kind of this challenge and divide. It's like, now I'm not as much motivated about the money. I've now that I've created some successes and some wins. Uh, uh, now I have, the risk tolerance starts to change,
Yeah.
and then you really start asking yourself, well, what is my motivation? And you realize that there's a lot of things that motivate you to do what you do. Where early on, I thought it was just about me.
Yeah. Well, I do. I mean, it's fair to say that I sort of want to use this as the basis of us progressing down the timeline, because I think I'm just personally extremely interested in that and trying to juggle it myself right now. So it just works and it's natural. And one of the things we have going for us in this interview is that a lot of times when people have these sort of conversations, they're just doing it because it's on a show or for a news clip or whatever. The beauty of our situation right here is I'm extremely interested personally. So I think there's genuine connection there. And I think that's what this whole show and podcast is really about. And it's tough because I oftentimes say that you almost have to be selfish to a certain degree in order to provide for others. Like if you're not selfish with your time and investing your time into the business and doing all these things, wearing these different hats, and sort of, again, back to that, like, if not me then who, and you're stepping into scenarios you're not comfortable with, and you're kind of maybe some bravado there and all these things that you just have to do to get things moving. There is a level of arrogance there is a level of selfishness, but by doing that, and if you're able to shift out of it and not become a not good person, then you can provide for others. And so using that as the basis as you progress, I'm extremely interested to hear how you personally dealt with that, as time moves on. So
Well, I can walk you through that.
let's
and
do
I
it,
and
man.
I can tie it back to, what you mentioned, hearing from me when you visited, and why probably I have a little more openness to vulnerability than some other leaders.
Let's do it, man.
So for me, we started out, and then you just progress through the years. The business keeps growing. It grows on an average 15% per year, and so it continues to grow. We continue to add people. Um, it becomes more and more humbling when there's more and more people, and you start seeing, okay, you used to wear this hat, you used to do that, now these people are doing that, now this is growing, you didn't even hardly do much over here, but it's just, this is growing. uh, it became just interesting dynamic. I became a little less connected to every piece of the business, and it was super humbling, because it's like, oh, I didn't even do that, but I get credit for everything that happens in the business. And you give credit to where credit is due, but nonetheless, I started feeling more and more like, I didn't even do that, do I? I'm just dumb luck. Um, so what I did on the business is I used EOS. Listeners might know what that is, but that helped me kind of structure the business, gave me the discipline. In 2010, 2012, I hired an integrator, kind of stepped more into my identity as a visionary, understand what that is, and wrestled with that.
Was EOS, was that, I'm not sure, Gino Wickman, right?
Yes.
And that's where I'm glad that that is the case, because the rocket fuel thing makes a lot of sense for anybody who's aware of that book as well, by Gino Wickman, which is one of the things that empowered me kind of early on. Anyway, when was in that 2009 into 10 time frame, was that like a fairly new concept at the time? I'm not sure when that became relevant, or is it an older system?
Yeah, yeah. So it was. I first read the book Traction by Gino Wickman, and it lays out EOS, the system, which is entrepreneurial operating system, and it what it does is it helps you articulate for an entrepreneurial what I always experienced. Okay, so now now the business is growing to connect more people to it. It gives you a system to do that. It gives you a system to lay out where you're going, who you are, where you're going, what makes you unique, right? So you have it forces you to put it on paper, which was looking back kind of freaked me out because it was okay if I just want to take people along with me, let them experience it. Now I got to put it on paper. Now I got to put words to it. And articulating things has never been my strong suit. So it really asks you to do that, and that's where I think when it helped me recognize that people need this level of consistency and communication. Where I'm always changing it because I didn't think it's ready. So it helped me. It humbled me to that, and like I'm doing it wrong. There's a different way, but it also helped me, and forced me to articulate where we're going. That's when I started recognizing that I'm not sure I even know. I don't know how to say it. And then I started feeling a little bit like a fraud.
Contextually at that time, then a couple questions around that I just want to make sure we address before we move on. Contextually at that time in 2010, the company is now 20-ish years old. And how large in terms of like how many employees do you have? How many dollars in sales are you doing? Just so people can kind of grasp like what you're trying to juggle at that time.
Yeah, we were about 50 people then. 2010, we'd been, we'd expanded into Lowe's and Home Depot at that time, where, the previous decade before we weren't there. So it was becoming quite a bit more complex, and we were hiring more and more people. So it was on a trajectory, 15% growth, roughly the same amount of people per year. So we're constantly hiring people, bringing them into the organization and trying to connect them to our culture and what we're trying to do.
Makes a lot of sense. So there had to be sort of a trigger, I assume, to lead you into the whole traction thing. Was there like a meeting that you had with people that they're like, hey man, it feels like we're sort of lost? Was it just you having conversations with your wife at home? Like, this shit's stressing me out? Or like, I mean, what was the real moment there that kind of drove you to it?
Yeah, it's the complexity. So Les McEwen wrote a book that's, called Predictable Success. It kind of goes hand in hand with traction. But what I like about Les and what he talks about in Predictable Success, it talks about life cycles of the business. So first life cycle is startup, where you're just trying to establish a sustainable market. We did that early on with the trade shows, but then you go into this fun stage where now you're growing, and it's it's yes, I can do this, yes, I can do that, yes, I'll bring these people on board, I'd sign up Lowe's, and you're growing the business. But then you get into what he calls whitewater, and it's the complexity in whitewater, Les McEwen's words, where traction and EOS helps you. It helps you put process structure to things in a way that you can then manage, through a larger organization with more people. So you don't have just people doing whatever they feel like they need to do. It all ties back to kind of the North Star. And so traction organizes it, helps you do that ultimately. So it was really, without figuring something out like this, it's hard to keep all the plates spinning. I mean, that's how I would describe it back in that time. These plates were dropping, and these plates were dropping, and traction helped me create the structure, organizational structure necessary to deal with that complexity.
I want to stay. I want to stay in 2010 just for a minute here. Kids at that time, ages, like what's family life look for you? And the reason why I asked that is just because, again, in business, we're still humans too, and there's a whole nother level of life that we're trying to juggle, and that we also don't know anything about being a parent before we become one. And so, just what's that look like for you at that time?
Yeah, so I had a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a newborn in 2010. So
Okay,
yeah,
so
yeah,
a few things in the works there.
yeah. So you got complexity in the business, and you got a growing complexity in the home, and you're trying to figure out how to raise kids.
Was married life? I mean, like, did you what did your marriage look like at that time? Because I mean, I'm trying to, and again, like, I'm not trying to plant a seed that doesn't exist, but I'm just trying to put myself into that scenario, almost like you were in a movie scene of like what a guy would be dealing with at that time. I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah, this was a long time ago, but I think uh, the newborn at that time of life was interesting because I had my oldest is a daughter, and then we had a son, and then in 2010 we brought in the new one came, and so for me, one of the things I was struggling with, I didn't really realize it at the time, was my daughter has her personality, and my son, who's now he's 5 at this time, um, he he's a lot like my dad. So he's wired like my dad, and I'm like, and I had some challenges with my dad, so I was dealing with that. Um, but a lot of that from a parent standpoint is what how am I parenting, and how am I? Yeah, I think I was controlling their lives a lot, and I felt like, okay, my son, I don't, he needs to be doing this, not that. Like I needed to be doing more to control. Wouldn't say I needed to control my son, but I'm like, if I don't like what I think he should be doing, then I take that personally. And so I was wrestling with those things at that time. Interestingly, that third child is another son. As he grew up, he, then 2-3 years into that, is like, oh, he's a lot just naturally more like me. And so that dynamic too, as I was navigating that, I was struggling with that. I got, I helped figure some of that out more as you just kind of figure some things out. It's not about you.
Yeah, when you were going through that, so I mean, obviously you had the awareness to recognize you were in the whitewater stage, back to that book reference, and you start implementing the traction thing. I think a dynamic that a lot of people don't realize is when you start going through something like that as a business, there's a lot of mirror check that has to happen. And it can be tough sometimes. And I don't know if ego is the right word to use, but it can be tough sometimes to just admit that, like, hey, what we're doing here is not the best way. Not right or wrong way, but there's certainly a better way to be doing it, right? Efficiency, whatever standpoint. So we can kind of like progress then through what that looks like, and as those changes evolved, and I don't know if it means that, like, you're hiring new people in different positions, you're personally stepping out of them. But one thing I'm curious about just before we advance was when you started looking at that and like mirror checking yourself professionally, did it bleed into the personal life side of things too, where you're like, shit, if I'm doing this here, because there's so many crossovers to me.
Yeah. Not initially.
Okay.
So, I will laugh about. So as EOS helped me kind of organize the business, I was like, maybe this concept could help me organize my family chaos as well. And I laugh about that. So I tried applying business principles into family, and it didn't ultimately work out so well. I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah.
When your wife says, "Don't treat me like an employee," that's that's it's a telltale sign. But I spent in those years. It was really until 2016 where I took a different path with that. But 2010, 2012, it worked really well. So EOS worked well. It was humbling, but it was like, okay, it worked well. Let's apply it here. And it's a business principle. I wouldn't use it in the home. I had other issues that I had to deal with there.
Yeah.
So
What at the time was that easy for you to? That's a bad way to question that. Was it? Were you able to separate that after? I mean, because obviously you weren't immediately. You were trying to kind of apply it, and I think that's a natural human thing to do. Is just like, all right, we'll just dump this into this category. Um, but were you able then to just like leave home and go do Kreg Tool things and then come home and because personally for me that's I'm in that spot right now personally is I have just recently there was a comment that Jordan my wife made and I'll say this on camera and I shouldn't probably but the comment she made to me was there's nobody to hold you accountable. And I was immediately in that conversation. I was like, bullshit. I have people that depend on me. Like I have to be, when I set meetings, I have to be there. But she was right, man. Like she was right. There's nobody really that now from accountability standpoint of like, if I don't show up or if I'm not my best, like it might not go as well. But there's really nobody that was going to come and tell me like, man, you're messing up.
yeah.
You know, and it woke me up. It took a while, but that shit woke me up big time.
So how did you address that?
Well, I mean, I did dry November, the month of November this past year. I didn't drink at all. We figured out how to, I got back in the gym, tried to get more disciplined with my daily life. So many things I'm still imperfect at, but I would say I'm in my third month now of really just like facing things for what they are. So I feel like I'm a work in progress, but I feel like I'm being much more honest with myself of like, I am not doing this as good as I could be.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, it's
Well done.
well,
It's
not well done, but we're
so
working on it.
yeah, in that role, I would say my parents gave me a lot of empowerment and really little to no accountability, which I loved until you started dealing with, well, maybe there's some things I should be accountable to. I think the challenge that I found is if I'm not accountable and talking with somebody about it or just dealing with reality, then it's just all in my head. And that's challenge that I got to. So the business started getting better. It gave me more time, which was, back to, working 70, 80 hours a week. Okay. Now I've, all right, honey, now I got more time. I'm here. Feel like I'm doing better, but I still sensing like, well, actually I thought we were doing pretty good. Business is on a better path. And so we talk about accountability. So I met a guy, and this was 2016. This was had coffee with a marriage coach. Guy is about 20 some years older than me. And so I sat down thinking, all right, he maybe wants some money. He's kind of a ministry side of things as well. I might donate. I don't know why I'm going to meet with this guy. But I sat down 5 hours later, after this guy's asking me some questions. He's clearly seeing some things in me that indicate that maybe I'm not facing every aspect of reality. So I went home and asked Amber, I said, so, I'm sucking this stuff in because being aware of things I'm not aware of. I said, Amber, you think we should do marriage coaching? And she starts crying. I'm like, maybe the chaos here at home isn't as under control as I thought it was. So we said yes to this, and this was a year-long process. It started with, these two, it was a couple that coached us as a couple, and they came in and did like a 2-day intensive. And at one point, I'm describing something, and the guy goes, Todd, look at Amber. Amber, look at Todd. Look each other in the eye. And Todd, tell Amber how you feel about what you were just talking about. And I couldn't do it. I was like, I don't even know what do I feel? I deal in what I think about, I think transactionally. Um, I'm not sure I'm not sure I even know what I'm feeling. I think looking back, I did, but I was afraid to say it.
Kind of, I mean, it's sometimes to have thick skin and to put that armor on business wise, like it was it a level of like compartmentalization almost of just like I can't deal with my feelings all the time because I have to have this face on and doing that thing.
Yeah. At that time, well, I learned that that's what it was, but at that time I didn't really know. Like what like I became aware that 5 hour conversation and like sitting there face to face with my wife, I'm like, oh, like there is something that I'm not doing that's getting in the way. I was aware of it, but I didn't know what it was. So rather than just go through the um, coaching, I just said, well, I think I want to be my own coach. So I actually I enrolled myself into an executive coaching program that ultimately was a deeper dive into neuroscience and emotions, and learned what emotional intelligence was, and but it was a four like graduate level courses. The first two were all focused on self, and the second two were about building a business and taking it out. But the value for me was really digging in and understanding, and so part of that early on, I did a lot of writing. So I never would write much. And one of the things I've learned about is, I think it's good for anybody, especially the way my brain works, is I figure out what I'm thinking by talking. So I like to, I'll talk a lot to figure out what I'm thinking. Think about that in a business, leading it when I'm talking, and then people start to go do what you are talking about. I'm like, no, I just want to talk about it. Don't go do it. So I learned writing was very good for me to understand myself and what I was thinking. But I had to write this paper in this program. I read this book called Hiding from Love, and you have a deficit, you had to write about it. So what I learned, you talk about imposter syndrome. One of the things that John Townsend in this book called my issue, it was an admiration addict. And so an admiration addict is always concerned about how he looks. I think for me, just having success over the years is like, okay, I, I'm, yeah, I want you to see the good stuff. I think since I was in kindergarten, I was always trying to do what you needed to do to succeed. But what I recognized in that, and what it said in this, and an admiration addict is always trying to look good, and the difference between the real self and the false self is huge. So it gets into your issue. But the challenge or the cure to this is what really freaked me out. And so the cure to an admiration addict is to show your bad self so that others can love you. So if I go back to sitting there in the chair with my wife, what I would always do, transactionally tell her what was going on. So probably what we were talking about was something my dad was doing and how it was impacting me. And so what I had learned to do is transactionally kind of complain about my situation and somehow expect that person to feel sorry for me or whatever. But more likely than not, what my feeling at that point was, I felt like a bad son. So, experiencing shame. What I had learned to do is, I'm not going to tell you that's how I feel. Because one, I don't believe that, because my brain has told me that it's not what you did, it's what he did. And it's you can't control him, and you can only control you. But you experience feelings, and not all of them feel good. As a leader, every decision I make, I feel like a bad boss, feel like a bad leader, but I would never tell anybody that.
Right.
And so the cure to that is to practice that, and to bring up, okay, I feel like a bad son. I feel like a bad father. So
Right.
which I did, but and those were the kind of the feelings that I needed to connect to and share, that were standing in the right way of our relationship. Because if I don't tell her how I actually feel about it, she's just going to read my mind, and so it was affecting how we were connecting.
Yeah. Wow, man. Holy smokes. Yeah. That's first of all an extremely tough thing to do. I mean, facing that whole like sort of exposing your bad self or the realness of what you were feeling. I mean, what are examples of, did you do a lot of that through writing then? Or I mean, like what did that look like for you to kind of get going with that? Because that's crazy.
So first thing is awareness. So before I kind of had that experience with the coaching, kind of go through this paper and answer and figure it out. So now I'm aware of a problem. Prior to this, I was ignorantly, blissfully, I didn't have a problem. Now I know what my problem is, and the challenge now is, okay, what do you do about it? And so what I had to do about it was practice connecting with my emotions and sharing them, which was terrifying for me to do. But I wanted it. But I wanted to get better. I wanted to have a better marriage. I wanted to be a better person all in all. So part of that course and staying with the marriage coaching helped me understand that if I'm gonna get any better with this, I have to practice it. So I did. I mean, it took me about a year of just going through this. Amber, my wife's like, it was weird. That was a challenging year because I never knew you were that insecure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think insecure is one of those words that it gets such a heavy negative connotation to it. But I think it is fair to admit that we all have things that we are insecure about, and that's just real emotion, like it doesn't mean that you don't also believe in yourself at the same time, but you can be insecure. Yeah.
And I agree. So was I really that insecure?
But you had
It wasn't.
insecurities.
So I'm, I think I have, I'm very pragmatic, right? And so I'm not heavily insecure, but you have thoughts that we all have thoughts. You have all sorts of negative thoughts. And so what you do with those in your brain can lead to different things. And so I was practicing it wasn't so much insecurity about everything. It's just I was just verbalizing very real thoughts that were in my brain.
Did you?
And that's just I'm trying to normalize that. You in this course, it's your normal to have these thoughts. Everybody has these thoughts. Right. If we don't admit them and everybody just hides them, then they can affect us negatively. If we say it out loud, which especially men, you're not really encouraged to do.
I'm this leader, like I have to
have it all together. It disempowers the thought. And so I'm like, it was my way of battling, but you have to. So it's safe to do it with my wife, and a lot of that was just practice. But it's still, I say that because it's kind of funny. You don't just go around work telling everybody how bad you feel about
this
yourself.
Thing's burning down tomorrow.
Yeah,
yeah, right.
Yeah, so you learn how to process and deal with it. But
yeah. At this time, do you have do you have personal friends that you're able? So one of the things that I got into business coaching just shy of a year ago now, and this is another step that's really helped me out too, because I am able to talk about a lot of the thoughts that I didn't think about it in this way at all until you started describing it this way. But as I'm sitting over here, my wheels are turning like shit. That's why that's helping, is because I am able to talk to him about some of the things and struggles that we're going through that to your point, you can't just go tell everybody. And so having a person like that is sort of unbiased and can just listen to that is so important. But and what I've found throughout this process is there's just not a lot of personal friends that I have also, and not that you would even want to like necessarily put that on them either. Like you don't want to be that guy that's like, hey man, you got a minute? I got some shit I got to tell you, you know. And if and we've all had that friend that's like it's always negative and stuff. So I mean, can you speak to that a little bit of just like, did you have a couple homies that you could like at least go to and sort of express yourself naturally as well during that time? Or
So I'd say during that time, I stayed with that. We stayed with those marriage couple coaches, but for me, it was the man that So there's 3 years of kind of working through it there. So now today, yeah, I've got one individual who kind of I meet with monthly, and we provide that for each other. He's a CEO of a company, and so we can talk through some business things that you don't share with everybody, right? But also the personal side and how it. So it's you got to find people that get it, because because they have similar experiences, and not hide. The biggest thing is you just don't want to hide.
yeah. Well, you asked me before we went live here. You sort of asked the question, like, where'd all this come from? And that's sort of another layer of it too. Is I've found that like in recent years there are certain people, and I don't know if it's like the gravitational force thing or like why they have come into my life, but I talk in depth to people. Like I don't. I've joked about it on other episodes or whatever, but I sort of it gets old of that. Hey, how's things going? Business is great. Life's awesome. Look at my house. Check out my wife. Look at my kids. They're doing great. Like,
Yep.
all of that stuff. And man, like the shallowness of that, it wears on you a little bit. Sometimes you just need to sit down and like, let's get past the first 5 layers and get into a real conversation.
Yeah, because I mean, it gets into humans, right? And so we want deeper connection. It's just about training. So that's why when you visit, I don't even remember what I was talking about or what I said, but I try to demonstrate that to some level to invite. In this case, you invited me here because of it. It's just to invite that it's okay. We're all human. We don't have to go to you can go to these trade shows and talk to other. How's business? It's great.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Right. Well, let's just.
not.
I mean, I can speak specifically to it. The reason why I thought the way you approach your sort of not like elevator pitch, but you just sort of introduce like who is Kreg Tool, who am I. The humility I thought came from the fact that there was 25 or so. I mean, our group is a group of all men. I'm probably the youngest, but like most of them are much more successful and more established than I am. I'm sort of fortunate in that regard to be a part of it, but it's a group of talk about a group of people to talk to where it would normally be difficult to be like not the I don't know, like to posture yourself differently, right? And I thought there was just a level of vulnerability there when you were talking about different innovations and things that you've had to do with Kreg Tool that sort of came from not downfalls necessarily, but just hey, this hit our business hard and we had to figure this out, and that's why. And I thought that part of it was interesting in that setting of all dudes that are business guys, where it would have been really easy for you to stand up there and just been like, first 20 years, we grew 10% year over year. This is awesome. I'm awesome. We're good, So that's ultimately that is 100% why I reached back out to you. I was like, I need to talk to this guy some more.
Well, I appreciate that, and I think I've become, and I'm becoming more intentional at demonstrating that, because what I've seen through practice and various is everybody can resonate with it. It's a human condition that if we so we all know we're bullshitting each other.
Right. Exactly.
There's a lot of social media. That's what it is. It's like, look at me, and under the covers, it's not as successful as it feels, and a lot of successful people don't feel successful.
Right. Yeah. 100%.
So success, and you could be successful, but if you don't feel it, And
Yeah, that's a
it's so
oh
so what
man,
is
yeah.
success?
And how
You
do
know,
you
and that
well let's all right, let's I think this is a good moment to talk a little bit about as you start to implement I'm not running from that. I want to build on that because there's a lot of stuff here and I want to also respect your time too, but I want to make sure that I don't want to just run over this stuff and just breeze through it. So, I mean, as you're implementing EOS, you're having some of those mirror check moments. I'm sure there were some people in your company that was like, "See, Todd, I told you a year ago," and you're like, "I get it now, but we'll get it on paper." So you're going through that. Um, I mean, the in those moments then, because on now it's like you're not only thinking that you're not physically a part of each thing and in each success, but you're literally putting it on paper where it's as real as it's ever been that like Todd is not doing that. Like Joe is now moving the needle in that area. So let's just talk about like that progression then and just what that felt like and how, I mean, things kind of progressed from there.
yeah. So, I think I talked about taking EOS into my home, and what I recognize through this process is there's like human relationship and family dynamics, call it what you will, that need to be brought into business, and a lot of it's just connecting to the human side of things. I mean, businesses, it's we treat humans a lot of times like robots, and that's where my dig on EOS, which I think is great, but it all works until humans show up and they don't react. And so what I really recognize is there's a need to connect at a heart level with your people inside your organization, and ultimately, for me, it really comes down to your purpose and your values and where you're trying to go. But for us, our purpose, to me, it was a process of getting our purpose articulated in a way that, quite frankly, it's probably cheesy. It's like, really, do people really care? Do they really do we even really need it? People really care? People want to work in an organization that has a purpose because they themselves have a purpose. So we went from cheesy, like we're about employees, community, and three different things. So it was an evolution, but it was really listening to our internal folks, kind of continue to hone that in to say, I think what we say today is we exist. Our purpose is to help to activate people to connect, to activate people to experience the benefits of connecting head, hand, and heart. So what, and for us in the trades and in what we do, it's really about building, right? So people need to use their hands to do a tool, but it's recognizing that a lot of people aspire to do it, but I can't, I got to educate you, get you to the point where you believe you can buy a tool and do it. Because a lot of our customers are do-it-yourselfers, not professionals. About 15% of what we do is professional. The rest is do-it-yourself. So it's just connecting. So that's what we say it is, and that connects to that experience that I didn't. There was a time where I thought that was a really cheesy thing to say.
Do you think that because when companies are small and like Showtime Homes being there's 8 of us now, when you sit down and you sort of have those group conversations of like, all right, guys, we're going to put on paper. It is almost, it's like corny, like kind of awkward almost, but do you think that it can be thought of or like the perception of it can be cheesy just because there's a lot of, I need to get better at interview questions like this because I'm just going to like plant the seed, but it can, sometimes people just don't follow through with that stuff. It's just like something we put on a wall and we advertise with it, but we don't really do it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I mean, what did that part of it look like for you guys to make it real? Like the head, hand, and heart couldn't just be something you spewed to the public to sell stuff. You know what I mean? Like, what did that look like for you?
So early on, what came out of those, 2010 was, I would say, more vanilla and more safe ways to say, here's who we are, here's what we're doing. It didn't connect emotionally because the leader didn't connect emotionally. And so to the degree that I've been able to allow myself to, you know, for me, it's just really it's in the organization, and I didn't even have to articulate it. I just found people that said, "I really think it's this." Um, and so one, it's taken some pressure off me. Is I don't have to articulate it. I got marketing folks that are really good at articulating things. But I have to create an environment where they feel safe to express that. And so that's really how that purpose statement came about. Is it became closer to what people feel. So you could say this, and people are like, yeah, we say this, but I don't really like that. I connect with how it feels over here. So in my experience, it's just been a journey of connecting the words more to what the actual feeling is, which I think is important because as we continue to grow and add people, being able to articulate it is important to maintain the feel.
Yeah, to get that personal buy-in from each of those individuals that now becomes part of a bigger unit. I mean, my wheels are turning, and obviously, like from a selfish standpoint, I get the opportunity to hear this kind of stuff because I'm immediately connecting it to different things that, one of the things about the home building industry that was always shocking to me was even if people were happy with the physical home that they got built and the physical materials that are that you use to construct that home, and they love their tile and whatever, a lot of, and I don't mean to generalize like everybody, but a lot of the sentiment was like, but the process sucked, and my contractor never like communicated with me, and things were always late. And it's like, and there's a lot of factors that go into that, right? And sometimes it's not bad intent by people that things get pushed back and deadlines get missed and whatever, but there was like to your point, there was an emotional disconnect there. And it goes all the way back to when I first started as a project manager selling construction. I had a guy tell me one time, and I've probably said it on here before, but there's an older lady, and her friend was like helping her make this decision on a roof that she was potentially going to buy. And I actually ended up not getting this sale. But I got back and I said, man, it was like a 2-hour meeting. And my boss at the time was like, Jesus, that took you forever. You must have landed or whatever. And I was like, no, I didn't yet. I was trying to describe the process to her, and I'm not sure like I did a great job at it. And the comment he made to me was, don't educate, just sell. And obviously, like, I don't have to go elaborate any more than that. But I was like, that's not who I am, And so, but there is that out there where it's like, like that was missing that emotional, personal side of it, And I was like, there's got to be a way to connect better in the construction industry to the human and like to the experience.
Yeah. Well, my reflection on that is a home is a very personal expression of one, and so understanding process of things. I mean, it's a challenging thing to do. But I think the biggest thing is gets back to empathy. So recognizing that people are emotionally connected to their home. I mean, we are. I mean, and so having an emotional empathy connection to the customer in this case, I think is important, even if the process is going to. But that's where people are like, I want this to be so good, and then I have issues, and it's just when people get emotional, they get, they're different things come out, and then what we do is we blame other people.
Yeah.
So whether you're building it, or in my case, the being a boss man, it doesn't always feel good. I feel bad because sometimes I got to make a decision for the best interest of the organization that you're not going to like.
Yeah, and I mean, since then, we've tried to implement some other things, and I don't want to. We'll get it back to you, but the question that made me realize, like, hey, Derek, you're not doing a good enough job at articulating it. To your point, is Kaylee, who's running our marketing stuff for us and posting on socials and all of that, and is really responsible for how our brand's represented to the public, came to me one afternoon and was just like, I'm not sure what we're doing here. Like, what am I Like, I'm just trying to find good pictures to post. I'm just trying to create these good videos that are going to do well and get views. But like, what are we trying to do? And I was like, oh man, was that a reflection moment? And I was like, Showtime is all about this. And again, I don't need to get all into it, but that moment created I need to focus on that for all of us.
So what I would say there is that's been a journey for me of bringing folks in, and then they're like, so what do I do here? What are we about? And I would say, in my experience, and I think you just articulated it, is as the founder, as the owner, as the head of it, you oftentimes know. In my case, my experience is what I want to say. It's too personal to me to even say. So I know what I want to say, but I'm too. I've learned, and I'm not this way anymore, but I'm too concerned about saying it the way I think you want to hear it more so than what I want to say. And I think that's just shame on you, leader. Is your job is to connect to what's inside of you emotionally. And so, I said I can't articulate. Maybe I'm more afraid to articulate because I'm so passionate about it that I'm afraid to show that historically.
Yeah, because you always think that, I don't know, for me, and how I guess I relate to that is I think there's always like this handcrafted delivery, like this perfect way that I'm supposed to package the passion and feelings I have about this business to the public. That's like a Pepsi or a Coca-Cola type, like the slogans, and like back in the Ad Men days and like on Manhattan Street in New York, like that's like, it's supposed to be this perfectly articulated way. And sometimes we want to just, and so, I mean, like in that moment, I was like, built to last, because our slogan is built to last. I was like, built to last isn't, of course we use good products and our homes are going to last. Built to last is much more than that. It's about the relationships we create and the symbiote, the synergy between us and the clients and the experience that they have. And I just went on this whole tangent, and she's like, why why haven't we been talking about that? And
They
I was
go
like,
there.
yeah,
That's it. So
yeah.
so then I would ask yourself, like, why did that take so long to come out?
Yeah, it's just I don't know, like that. I felt like an idiot. I was like, how in that moment I felt so stupid that I had hired a person who is quite literally, their position and job is supposed to be to carry out our brand, and I hadn't even let her know what our brand's about. Like, I felt like a moron.
Well,
Yeah,
I've been there many times.
crazy.
Been there many
But
times.
so I want to, I remember when we went and visited your facility. You come out of like that 2010 era, things start to click. You guys sort of start to create this. The COVID era, and I don't want to get like too much into the whole COVID thing or any politics about it at all, but it was a real indirect impact to you guys as a business. And I'm just curious, I guess, like, it's really good probably that you had established a true identity, like, going into that time. But can you just talk through like maybe some of the importance of having that true self and all of that, like going into that time period, and just sort of how to help you get through it?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. For us, when COVID hit, our sales just took off because people were in their homes and they wanted to fix stuff up, and Lowe's and Home Depot were open because they were essential. Yeah. And so we did. We were employing through part-time labor over 300 people at that time. So some of that's because we manufactured more things than we do now, but it was crazy busy. It had its own challenges, I think, but what was very tangible is so we're a business where it's not the first thing people do. You're competing with time, disposable income, different things. So for us, we used our purpose. It was very much on display. And so, you're asking people to come in especially in the early days of COVID, and and work together. All office people went home, but all the manufacturing people are there working. And so, I think recognizing that, people are buying our products because it's impactful. So using purpose was is very tangible. So that was fun. But in the same period of time, we broke ground on a new facility that was, taking us from 3 facilities into 1 facility, and you're building a facility and office space and everything for people and collaboration as part of your company culture when the world was changing to now it's great to work from home. So I think that was the most interesting dynamic in the whole season and post-COVID is we went through a major project, time and energy and cost to build a building that, quite frankly, is I used to think it's just functional. Well, you get connected to the experience of things, and part of your space creates your culture. You create that experience. It was very intentionally built, but yet now people are wanting to work from home. In our folks, for the most part, wanted to work because it's the people. But and then you start hiring new people, and they're like, oh well, I can work in Michigan from Iowa. So that was an interesting dynamic that I think that the new building facility helped us kind of confront that change in culture it's trending back in I'd say in a more positive way.
Can you speak to some of the intentional and specific things with like the angle of the roof line, like just some of just to give people who don't know what your facility is or whatever, because there are some, it's one of those facilities that you walk into and you do feel some type of way. Like there's an inspiration. I mean, it immediately hit me when I walked in there. So if you could just talk about that a little bit.
So one, we did this, very, very intentional, to the degree, and we used the engineering, the design engineering side of this was the design architecture firm was a big part of the process and building into a facility our culture. And we went through the process, looked at a bunch of folks. Everybody gave us what we were asking for, except this one group that gave us what we asked for, and then envisioned, the original. It looked like a spaceship, the building, which we didn't go to that regard, but it was inspiring, and it inspired something different than what we asked for. So I asked the guy later on, the head of the firm. I said, why did you do that? He goes, well, you were asking for this, but we listened to who you are. We listened to your culture. We had a 25-year anniversary book that we did out, kind of talk about the culture. He goes, what we showed you was what we felt like we were hearing from you, and this is your culture, and we this is what we do. We know how to bring that to life. You know how to make woodworking tools. We know how to create a space. And so, when you walk into that space, we got, big beams out front that are, they look big and cool, but they're at a 15-degree angle, which is the angle of a pocket hole. And so there's just from when you walk into, every aspect of that facility, it's intentionally designed to match who we are. And that to me was a very fun process because it was connecting in a physical space, kind of what we've been talking about earlier, is just connecting to a deeper level. And you got to believe that a facility has that purpose or can function that way. And we do, and it does. But back to COVID, that was being challenged because of the whole work from home thing.
Was there a sense of when that sort of came back, was there like an aha moment of, I mean, I'm sure there's many reminders of that. Our culture is real, and it's a tangible thing. It's not just something we say. It's not just something we put in literature or advertise with. But I mean, that had to be a moment that was kind of like, shit. If somebody else is seeing that when we weren't trying to sell our culture on them. We were just, I don't know. Can you describe maybe what that felt like, or if other people on your team recognize, like, man, that's cool. I mean, was there does that make sense? Or just like in those meetings for someone to pick up that much on like, this is what these people are about. There had to be a
For the
sensation there.
yeah. Well, it so I'd say yes. I mean that was that. How did that go?
Well,
Is your
I mean,
question, or
did you
how did
guys
the
have
interaction?
I'm just curious if you guys had any conversations see, like what we're doing is real, and if that was like a validation moment of it's coming through obviously without us. Because when you have culture and different things, I mean, certainly we all use it through a form of marketing, and we're trying to connect to people and this and that and drive sales. But like that was sort of one of those moments, it feels like, where you didn't have necessarily anything to gain by, I mean, sharing your story was important, but the fact that they felt some type of way to design you a facility that really speaks to like who you guys are, that had to be like a validation moment to some degree of.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it resonated with us because prior to that whole process is one connecting, going through a process where we as an organization we're a human centered organization is some terms we were using once. So is recognizing that it's not all robots. There's humans that come and the space is we can say it's important. I mean, people a space creates an environment. And so I
Mhm.
think we went into it with that belief. And then so without that belief, I don't think we would have gone with the more expensive version of this because we didn't value it. So that I think that helped. The challenging aspect from it is while COVID was really good, post COVID was not so good, and we ran into just supply chain issues, demand issues, but we also ran into some products that we had come out with post COVID and launched that didn't work. They really weren't to brand. And so one of the things that I've had to do since COVID or in that process, is kind of redefine the brand, recognize that the identity of the organization was a little too broad, which allowed for some non-Kreg product to come into the system, and to kind of narrow it even more in a way that I always felt it should be, but I allowed for the organization to expand. So it's been challenging. We've actually shrunk. We built a building for growth. We've actually decreased people since, but I'm still. People ask, you like that building? Well, it's a little more than we need right now. But long term, I think it is actually serving to challenge us, because we've got to find ways to grow this organization to sustain a building, and we're a little early on in the process, but we are about to launch a new line of products within the specialty woodworking dealers that we uniquely have the opportunity to do and the position to do as a result of just challenging ourselves in new and different ways that I'm feeling good about, feeling really good about. But it's all from who we are and we're trying to be someone else a little bit. Really, we're trying to be the be all, do all, in do-it-yourself home improvement. But we are part of a little niche of woodworking. And to the degree that we stay focused on that niche, then we can have some success.
Yeah, the whole pressure makes diamonds thing and all of that, right? Like the stuff people say, but there is so much truth to sometimes when you just get slapped in the face with something, and how you sort of respond from that, that really like it's sort of that at that time kind of measures like, who am I, and what are we, and not to be singular, but who are we, and are we going to get through this type of thing. So it is fun to see people rebound from those challenges. One of those aspects is, when I was fortunate enough to tour your facility, you have that, where you guys do a lot of video work and educational stuff. And is that sort of part of that process? Like coming out of that is like, how can we connect in a better way, especially when maybe physically face to face isn't as possible?
Yeah, we are big into creating our own. We create our own content, but we used to do it. My uncle, right, at shop, he used to teach shop class to doing trade shows. You're teaching, you're educating. Trade shows. No, people don't go to trade shows. People used to go to trade shows for a deal and get taught something. Now you can get your deal online just about every day. Go to Amazon or wherever. So we have to find, we have to navigate the social media world and the content and all of that to connect with our customer in an educational way. And so we've invested in the facilities to do that. But it's so important to connect with your customer that way, that it's something we're doing, just about every day. We're shooting videos and educating on the product.
Yeah, our big thing around here lately has been everything's content. Like it really is down to the process, that this stuff that we don't view as interesting at all, it's interesting to somebody a lot of times. And that was an inspirational moment to see a company of your guys' size getting into more of that world, and the fact that you created out that space to do it in, and do it well, to really care about it enough to do it well, which I know sounds stupid, but you really put the emphasis into it, I guess, that I feel like is necessary, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, I think it's so we did the trade shows, and then we did, for about 10 years, we did an infomercial. So we kind of, it's a little made for TV kind of. Now today it's online, and we are the brand in our space that if we're not creating that content and educating, the market will shrink. We're not the only one, but you have to be putting content out there, inspiring people, educating them, and that's the position, the brand position that we're in. We have a lot of competitors that come in, and they can copy some of the product features and some of that, but you got to be committed to the customer and what's good for growing the market, and that's content and getting out there and showing people.
Market responsibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is kind of crazy. You have to support an industry that also sustains your competitors and everything, because you owe it to a customer base that you sort of serve. I think, well, I mean, your story is one that, if we really dove into the Kreg side, I mean, I think we could spend 2 weeks probably recording that entire journey, but I sort of want to spend some time here to wrap up with, where are you at today, man? I mean, going through, your kids are older now, going through those marital, not issues, but just things that everybody faces, or whatever we want to call it. But, having gone through that journey, caring about it enough to dive into yourself, enough to go through coaching classes and doing all that, like, not that necessarily what's the next step, but just, I mean, you're obviously in a good headspace, because the way you talk about your journey is incredible. But I mean, just what is kind of next, or where do you see your growth coming from?
Yeah. Well, so I'm in a it's a challenging season, in that my role as a CEO is no longer. So I'm not, I can get up, I'm gonna go to work, and I know what I'm gonna do for kind of all day, every day. So now I'm in a space where it's like, well, how do I steward this business well? And then what else do I do? And so I'm in a season where I'm really focused on just not worrying about exactly what my role is. It's more about the relationships that I'm building. How do I use, what I've been fortunate to experience to help and influence others in positive ways, whether that's city, schools. Those are things I'm involved with in Ankeny where I live. But then, it's a journey of exploration, and I some days that's frustrating, and I'd really like to know what I'm going to do. I'd like to invest and conquer the next mountain, but some days it's just about enjoying where you're at and having conversations. I mean, this is why I said yes to this, is because it's just part of it is just sharing and engaging, a dialogue within a community. So it varies, but yeah, I'm in a good headspace. I got right now I'm really focused on my kids and make sure they launch into life well. My daughter just graduated college. She's starting her career. My son just entered college. So you start really focusing on next generation and legacy stuff, and what does that look like, and spending time. Have I done enough? Do I need to do more? Wrestling with those thoughts.
Yeah, my kids being young, that's one thing that I've been asking myself a lot lately too. Is first of all, so my stepdaughter's 10. We have 10, 6, and 4. She turns 5 in March. But one of the things I've been asking myself is they, of course, see you in a certain way. When kids are young, they see their dad, their mom and dad both in a certain way. And usually that's extremely positive. They're awesome, right? Well, other than when they're throwing a fit. But, when they get older, like, will I disappoint them essentially, or like, am I doing the things necessary to that I could possibly sustain that feeling? And it sort of led me to this thought yesterday, and I actually posted it. Just like, I think in terms of success for me, it's really just like the degree to which I was able to positively impact those around me, and like, because to your point, legacy is so important to me, because I feel like I'm this like generational, like I had to turn tides a little bit with my generation. And so, I mean, can you talk to that a little bit? Like with your kids, that's extremely interesting to me. It's just like, I'm still obviously.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I wrestle with that. I haven't met anybody that hasn't had some challenges with their parents, right? I think we do. I think I'm trying to screw my kids up differently than I got screwed up. But it's a posture that I've started to it's recognizing that I'm never going to accomplish everything that I Todd Sommerfeld want to accomplish in life. Like, I have ambitions in me that are like big and
Like,
great
just
and
insatiable almost.
yeah, just like it's like it'll never be enough unless I allow it to be. And so it's recognizing that, one, that drives good thing. It helps drive things forward. But if it's all about that, then I miss the next generation. So what I've started, it's not just about what I accomplish in life. What's probably more important is, what does the next generation accomplish? So it's really easy for me to focus on my kids, but in a business, I take the same posture too. It's just like there's another generation coming, and it's not what I accomplish; it's what they accomplish. And then how did I live my life in a way that set them up for success to do that? And that's really helped take the pressure off my I gotta conquer the world syndrome, and helped me focus more on the foundational relational things that I'm doing to build up my kids or the next generation.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't even expect that fully articulated thought there, but you're exactly right. That does kind of alleviate some of that, like, to your point of not being directly in that role anymore.
Takes the
CEO
pressure
stuff,
off.
and
You
you can
can
just lay
look
down at
out
night
far enough
Mhm.
that it's like I don't have to figure it out. I don't have to accomplish what I want to accomplish tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm looking out 20, 30, 40 years. So,
Well, I can tell you I'm extremely grateful for you taking time this morning to come meet me. I mean, we set this up almost a couple months ago now and had it on the calendar. We adhered to it. I love
yeah,
that. Um,
been fun.
yeah, I definitely personally was able to learn a lot, and I appreciate you sharing some real and raw shit with us that not a lot of people are willing to share.
Well, and I thank you for doing this. You know,
Yeah.
just your why for doing this is you know, there's some self, but it's impacts things at a higher level, brings some accountability to the conversation, and helps people, all of us, deal with reality.
Mhm.
So I think that segued well into what we talked about today. So thanks.
Cool, man. Well, thank you.